Welcome to Public Affairs Roundtable, a discussion of current events in the nation and around the world and how they affect the people of Indiana. Here's your moderator, Larry Lough.
600,000 Hoosiers cannot read or write, yet 75% of the new jobs require education beyond the high school level. 2/3 of our prison population and fully half of the heads of household in Indiana do not have a high school diploma. Is it any wonder that Governor Evan Bayh has declared education to be Indiana's #1 problem? Today on Public Affairs Roundtable, we'll continue our look at issues facing the state and our state legislature now in session. Our panelists are John Rouse, producer of this program and a member of Ball State's Political Science Department; Bill Skinner, Director of Corporate Development for Ball Corporation; Pat Eddy, President of the Muncie Teachers Association; and Sam Abram, Superintendent of Muncie Community Schools. John, education is one of these godmother and apple pie issues that no one is against education, but there seem to be different levels of support for it.
Education, I think, is somewhere between the pocketbook and the soul. Education certainly has a pocketbook dimension from the point of view that education is the bridge between the past and the future. In other words, if we are going to be able to compete economically in the future, we have to always retrain, rethink, and retool. That's a pocketbook dimension, so to speak. Now, education, of course, in a historical sense, has a focus in terms of the soul. And when I think of the soul, I think of issues in terms of liberal arts and languages and history and sociology and law and things of the soul, you know, the things that have that value that deal with our very being. So it's kind of a combination between the pocketbook or economic issues and the soul or liberal arts. And in terms of our society, it's extremely important, if we're going to have an active society, that we be very attuned to the latest in education.
You mentioned economic. Bill Skinner, it is said education is an economic development tool, that in fact the corporate community, the business community has become really interested in the education of our society. How do the two work?
Larry, I think as the United States finds itself more and more involved in global economics, excuse me, one of the things that we absolutely need is to keep our technological edge. And one of my concerns, and one of our concerns at Ball, is the lack of engineers and technicians that are coming out of the schools today. I think it reflects back to the math situation. We need stronger math in the schools. We need stronger science in the schools. We need to stimulate the kids to go on into becoming technicians, engineers, and scientists. And I think it's absolutely necessary that along with that, they also have a basic founding in English and communications, because if you invent something and try to sell it to the world, you have to be able to communicate your ideas, not only to your individual workers within your own company, but to your customers and to a larger constituency. And the other thing I want to add to that is that I think it's absolutely necessary as we look at a global economy that we have kids and graduates that understand the geography of the world. Yeah. And those are 4 issues that I think are really hit home as far as I'm concerned.
Patty used the words teaching and stimulating. Sound like 2 charges for every teacher, every classroom teacher in America, and in the world, I suppose. A lot of the rap is being laid on the teachers who aren't doing the job. Is it the fault of the teacher, or is the instruction the problem?
No, I don't think that teachers are less capable than they used to be. Society has changed. We have a different student population than we used to have. Yes, it is our responsibility as educators to educate children to meet the needs of society. But more and more problems have been heaped upon the educational system. Sometimes curriculums end up being watered down to get percentage of students to pass through courses. We still have bright students, we still have good teachers, but we do have a different population of students to work with overall. It is our responsibility to keep changing our methods and the way we work with students to meet the needs and to prepare those students for their future life.
What's the solution, Sam? We need more money in the system. We need a change of attitude of all Americans, a little of both?
Probably a little of both, and then we could add a few more things too, Larry. Before I comment, I would like to indicate that I certainly agree with the statements that have been said, especially in relationship to our teaching staff. I think it's important for citizens in Indiana to realize that we do have quality persons working in our school systems. I think a part of our challenge, it goes back to the business aspect. And when you look at the business aspect, we need to look at education as an investment. And when we look at it as an investment, then we're going to do certain things, and we'll do them in a certain way. The legislators are proposing funding for some opportunities to study everything from latchkey programs and pilot them to preschool programs, to whether or not we should have required half-day kindergarten, required full day, or some opportunity for communities to contribute to some of those options. I think the research, however, is very clear. It's appropriate to study, but more important than continuing to look at opportunities to study, we need to look at what's been studied already. The information's out there, the facts are clear. We simply, in Indiana and in the United States, are not getting the start we ought to with our students. We have the mandated attendance that does not require kindergarten, yet all the research says the earlier you start, the better off students are going to be. Part of what Mr. Skinner is indicating, students who get off to a shaky start aren't going to have the same kind of end. And we're putting a lot of money into programs that are after the fact. Our at-risk programs and other programs are necessary. We need that because we now need to work at both ends and the middle as well.
Governor Bice says we need a change of attitude in this state. If you look at the state where half of the heads of household in Indiana do not have a high school diploma, it would seem to be that perhaps Hoosiers don't put as great a value as necessary on an education. Is that a fair statement?
Well, I think we have to define what education is, and every culture defines what is important. Education, in my thinking, involves options and opportunities. What has happened in education is that as the family has changed, as other institutions like that have changed, the focus comes on education to eradicate racism, to provide school lunch programs, to do so many things that it's impossible for our schools to completely full an impossible agenda of that sort. So I think we have to ask, for example, how do Hoosiers want to be able to be competitive in the future? And how are they going to have the kind of lives that we want for our people? I don't know that I have that answer.
I think it would start with having a good, solid foundation in the 3 R's, reading, writing, and arithmetic. And I think one of the problems we have is an awful lot of kids coming out of the schools today really don't have that foundation.
So the thing you're saying, Bill, is it, you know, as they say, we have to get back to basics. They don't have the focus upon the fundamentals.
I agree. That's my feeling anyway.
But do they, you know, Pat seems to indicate that this is a changing society. You have a different product going into the schools in terms of support from parents and family.
That's right. We have children coming to school who are less prepared. They don't have the preschool skills that 20 years ago children had. I do think there's a problem with the value of education being taught in the home. We have too many parents who do not even get their children to school on a regular basis. That is a value, that's a family value on education. We can't do anything with that child unless they are in the classroom. Yes, we want all children to have a good basic foundation in education, the 3 R's, so to speak. On the other hand, schools have been given the responsibility of drug education, sex education. We are to feed the children. We are to try to clothe them. We have to watch after their health. Social studies. I mean, we have so many things to cover, and we only have so many hours in a school day. I think teachers are teaching the basics as strongly as they ever did, but children do have to come to school being motivated to learn.
So maybe we ought to give them to parents for 8 hours and teachers for 16 hours a day. Is that what you're saying here?
Well, that would help.
I think a part of the challenge, too, is that as we move through time and everything takes major changes in this country and the world, it requires more of a commitment. And we have some families that simply haven't been able to make that commitment. And a part of our challenge has to be, what are we going to do with identification of families who simply cannot make the commitment that our sons and daughters are going to do certain things and they're going to make certain decisions. We have too many youngsters, not just in Indiana, but in our United States, who are making decisions they shouldn't make. And we need to identify those families and target more collective energies from various agencies and individuals and communities to say to those families, we understand your challenge. We can't accept your position regarding the challenge. And we are going to do certain things, and you are going to do certain things. And I think we're going to need to reach a point and a position with families where we've tried lots of things to motivate them, and we're simply not getting the response that supports the educational environments and the opportunities that are there. And we're going to need some special kinds of situations where someone other than school people can join in and say to that family, you will or else. And we simply must get there, because we have a majority of our students who are doing some things and doing them well. And that's an important fact for all of us to remember. We're talking about a minority of students, number. When I say minority, I'm referring to numbers of students who simply are not making the right choices, and they're being allowed to do that. It could be that there are major problems in the home, and the parents may not have had the proper training or education themselves, and they're relinquishing some authority and also responsibility. And we need to help them to hold on to that, and in some cases we're going to need some help in saying, you simply will or else.
Isn't this whole concern a moral issue? Because in the last 25 years, it seems like there's been a whole lot of focus upon process and not enough focus upon moral values or substance. In other words, people are so concerned about fairness and being kind to people that if we do not have demands upon our students, if we do not have demands upon ourselves, is this a lack of morality in the sense that we're not doing those fundamentals, and aren't so many institutions protecting incompetence?
I disagree. Don't want to speak to that point, but I would disagree. We simply have a situation where unless the coordination, unless things are synthesized and articulated to a great degree, there are too many loopholes for young people. There are too many situations where someone in the home is trying something, the school and social agencies, the court system, whatever, and all those entities need to work more closely together to say to a youngster, you have no choice but to follow this kind of a pattern. And we simply have too many youngsters are allowed to go through the process. They go through the process and they end up not really knowing where their next step is going to be, and also not knowing how to take that next step. There really is no reason for any high school youngster not to have a commitment that would see them finishing high school with other steps in mind. And there needs to be a variety of options for other steps. But we have too many youngsters that are making statements like I hear sometime. After a graduation ceremony, a youngster might say, well, I've got my education. You know, we know that it's a matter of lifelong learning. And we look at people in the business world, and so often they're looking for young people who can continue to learn, because things are changing so rapidly that unless they have the basic skills and the tools to be a continuous learner, they're not going to be able to survive.
Pat mentioned drug education, sex education. Sam, you talked about students just making the wrong choices. What you're talking about is teaching values to students. Can you really do that? Teach these values, teach the value of education, the necessity to learn, if they don't get the support at home? Is it possible?
You know, I'm taking the position that as school people, we can't do that alone. Unless we collectively approach that topic and that opportunity, for many students, it's not going to occur. Now, again, the majority of the students are going to come from homes where the support is there, the background's there, everything is there, and they're taught and motivated from birth on that here are some things that just are going to happen. They don't even think about it. They go through life having had uncles and aunts and grandparents who've gone to school, who've done things, and they just see themselves flowing through life in a very productive and positive way. But for many youngsters, that pattern has not been set within their background, their family, their experiences, their community. And we can't do it alone in the schools. Yes, values are important, but it takes our churches, our United Way agencies, our businesses, community people who don't have children, all of us working together to more or less demonstrate, if you will, the end results of certain kinds of values.
Sam, if I could just jump in for a minute. Larry quoted some statistics at the beginning of the program concerning high school graduates, and I think some statistics on the number of graduates that are going on to college. One of the ways we measure ourselves is how do we compare to the rest of the country. And when you look at the state of Indiana, my understanding is we're pretty low. We're down pretty far in that scale.
You're right.
And I guess the question I have is, what are we doing? What are we learning from the other states? What are we learning from other communities that have the same kind of problems that you're talking about?
I think one of the things we're learning is that you must have a collaborative effort, and something that pleased me perhaps more than many other things this year is to see our governor and our chief school official, Dr. Evans, join forces and say to people in this state, we may have our priorities and our differences, but we're going to make a commitment to work together. And that is a great signal, and it's a great hope to be able to think now that the top leaders are agreeing that we really can't make progress if we don't work together. And it takes making compromises. I think there are a number of other things that we've identified. Our statewide testing program, that's saying to people we are going to have some standards. Now, it's like anything else. When you first start out, it's not exactly what you want it to be. And there's been a committee that studied our testing structure and program. We've decided that it needs to be more comprehensive. The higher level thinking skills and some other proficiencies are not being tested. And it's important that the tests be expanded. But hopefully by 1992, around that time, the tests will be revamped and piloted and ready to add a broader base as far as saying to students and families in Indiana, you are going to achieve these kinds of levels in these kinds of areas. And really I'm saying we need standards, and we're moving in that way.
Indiana has been really low in terms of per capita support for education, and there have been calls for more money, higher teacher salaries. How would more money help improve education in Indiana, Pat?
Yes, it does take money to improve education. As I said, we have different students coming in, or students coming in with different problems. Some steps have been taken to make changes in education. Dr. Abram talked to iStep. We have prime time in place. These are things geared toward making some changes in education. They also take money. We need to expand technology skills within the schools. We do need to prepare our students better technologically for the future. Classrooms don't have standalone computers and so forth. It takes money for those things. I think too many people, the general public, wants to think that when teachers advocate more money for education, we're talking about salaries for teachers. Sure, teachers need an adequate salary. That's the only way you're going to attract new people into the profession. But all of the programs, the preschool programs, an all-day kindergarten program, maybe latchkey programs, they all take money. And maybe they are all parts of a puzzle to help us improve education, but you can't do those things without money.
If I can get back to this is interesting, because I think there are four things we can look at as far as education is concerned. Number one, as Pat says, it's economics, it's jobs, it's economics in the community. Number two, it's bureaucratic politics and it's bureaucratic power, and how do you get around the bureaucracies of each school area, each school, to get to number three, the substance. the substance. And number 4, it's entertainment. If we put as much emphasis upon education and the fundamentals in this Indiana culture as we put upon Indiana basketball or high school basketball, what's the flagship of our schools? Is it the 3 R's? No, I'd say it's Indiana basketball. That's entertainment. Or schools there for entertainment, and going back to point number 2, bureaucratic politics, bureaucratic power. It seems that so many groups, whether it's management, labor, or the parents, are protecting incompetence. And until we get around the bureaucratic power issue back to the substance and instead of basketball being first, having the 3 R's first, we're going to be talking about the same kinds of things.
A lot of that has to do with focus. And, as a state, we're in the beginning stages of focusing on education. There are a number of very positive signs. There's more funding. There are more other kinds of resources. But I think it's like a goal we have for the Muncie Community Schools. It's no big secret. We want our schools to depict academic excellence and priority on academic achievement. And we may not be exactly where we want to be in that area, but I can guarantee you that every staff member understands that that's a goal, and every administrator, and we're expecting administrators to provide leadership, understands that we need to move from having that emphasis on extracurricular activities, whether it be basketball or whatever, to helping people to understand that we're talking about academic achievement of individual students and families. And we are, if you will, we are educating families as we educate individuals in our system. And then we need to stop thinking about minimums. The state of Indiana, if we're going to make the progress we need to make, we need to get away from minimum expectations. That means we need to understand where we are in our schools, in our different communities, and then to say, what do we need to do and when do we need to do it in order to be where we want to be later? And in education, you're always talking about investment that pays off later. A lot of people don't realize that. They're looking for immediate results. And there will be some. And those of us who work with students on a daily basis, we can see that. But for the larger community and this country of ours, we're talking about an investment that may not pay off for years when you can really see the end product. And we're talking about looking at what we do. I'll give you one example. Let's just look at language, foreign language. Each of our 3 children took foreign language. One took it in high school. The other 2 didn't take it till college. I'll guarantee you that 2 that took it in college struggled. It was a challenge. It was work. And our daughter who took it in high school, it was more fun for her. But it would have been a thrill to have seen children, not just our children, but children in this community and any community, getting that when they really should get it, and that's at the elementary level. So we need to look at some things that are not happening and say, how are we going to plug these things in so we can get the best results from our efforts?
One of the things that we do in business, in any business, is study the competition.
Yes.
And I think one of the things that would be helpful in boosting our statistics would be to try to understand what the better states are doing. Who's the best and who's the best community in that state, and try to find out what in the world they're doing to improve their educational system.
Yes.
And I don't know if we have a program in that or not.
Well, Bill, I see your point in the sense of that we should look to other states that do things really well, but we have to look to ourselves and figure out what we want to do. And if I can pick up on the point that Sam made about languages, beginning with English perhaps, but also focusing upon the word focus in terms of leadership, the problems are bureaucratic and economic, but the problem is leadership in terms of folks like yourself in business, labor, and management, the governor. You have to articulate new kinds of goals. What would happen if this entire state required a foreign language, first of all English, but secondly a foreign language of every student in every high school in Indiana? Now, to me, that would be revolutionary. And now that has a payoff, too, because in terms of international economics, we could make this state a prototype, in a sense, in terms of studying foreign languages and mixing that in with international business, because the future is going to be in that area. what would happen to the system, meaning the bureaucracies, if all of a sudden the governor and people like yourselves from business, from labor, from management said, next year every kid in Indiana has to graduate with a foreign language?
Do we have the teachers to do that?
See, that's the real challenge. We've had too many situations where people have said to us, next year you will do such and such. And we don't have what it takes to do that. And we haven't had the time to gear up and get ready to do it. So often, and this really gets back to what happens to teachers. I've been known to say that, I've forgotten what it's like to teach. And I still consider myself a teacher. It's just teaching a different group of people. And you need an opportunity to be prepared to teach. And if something new is coming along, we won't have enough teachers to do it. And the teachers we do have will need some staff development opportunities in service, if you will, to get ready. It's not as simple as people think it might be to just say to educators, do this or do that. It really takes time, and it takes their involvement. A lot of our challenge with our statewide testing program is that we didn't have the teacher involvement leading up to that particular requirement on statewide testing.
Do we have
and we're going back, and that's being incorporated into this next round, getting ready to revamp the testing program. There will be more teacher involvement.
Do we have a situation where we had too few teachers who we have now who never studied a foreign language? Does that matter?
Yes, it matters.
Sure it does.
Yes.
That's part of it. But in college, obviously, you have to have a certain curriculum. I mean, you graduate with 1 or 2 or 3 areas of study. It would be very difficult, I think, to try to gear college students into a foreign language curriculum. First of all, most of them don't even want to go into teaching. Society right now does not give teachers much prestige for the profession that they have. So until society wants to make some changes and say teachers are important and we value you, we can't even get young people to go into the teaching profession. There would have to be some incentives, I think, to go into some special areas. More science teachers, more math teachers. Private industry is taking some of the best college students in those areas. So I think there would need to be some incentives to develop more teachers.
I love the idea of starting with English.
Yes.
Both the written word and the
Yes.
spoken word,
Yes.
so that we could have kids coming out that can articulate what their ideas and thoughts are.
As a first foreign language to study. Well, we don't need to go any further. In fact, we can't communicate another word. We're out of time. Thanks to John Rouse, Bill Skinner, Pat Eddy, Sam Abram for being with us here today for a discussion of education. I'm Larry Lough. See you next week.
Roundtable is produced in the studios of WIPB Channel 49 on the campus of Ball State University. The producer is John Rouse. Listener comments are welcome.